This is a panel on informing trust fund projections. The moderator will be John Sabelhaus. So John is a visiting fellow at the Urban Brookings Tax Policy Center. He has a PhD from University of Maryland. I think of him as being an expert on wealth data, consumer expenditure data. Excellent all-around economist. John, I appreciate your serving as moderator.
Thank you, John. I really, really appreciate your inviting me to moderate this session. There are, we're going to see 3 great papers, and they get to one of the things I worked on 20 years ago, I think before I knew John, or maybe right as I met John, which is about using mostly microsimulation, but other types of micro-based techniques to think about macro questions. And the real key, the thing that ties these 3 papers together is there are things that are happening to groups of people that are also affecting macro outcomes and Social Security budgetary outcomes. So we're informing trust fund projections, but we're doing so in a very important way. So our 3 papers, the first we will hear from Hanke Heun-Johnson, who is a research scientist at University of Southern California, using the FAM and FEM models to study COVID-19. And again, showing us sort of the, the 2 sides of COVID-19. It's obviously a terrible set of outcomes, but it does have implications for Social Security finances. After that, and I will just segue straight from one to the other, we will hear from Karen Smith, who's a senior fellow at the Urban Institute, using the Dynasim model. So another great microsimulation model used for studying long-run problems, talking about the implications of differences, black-white differentials in terms of earnings capacity and other demographic characteristics that affect how Social Security impacts them, but also in turn, sticking with the theme, impacts the Social Security system more generally. And finally, we have a last-minute pinch hitter from the team at Opportunity Insights. Inez Sauquet will be talking about the work that they've been doing on narrowing or the narrowing of racial wealth gaps and what the implications are, again, for Social Security. So with that, I have my trusty timer set. I assume everybody's going to stay on time, and we're going to wrap up here on a Friday in good stead. We will have plenty of time for questions. So I'll go ahead and get the timer started and hand things over to Hanke.
Thank you, John. Let me share my screen. Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can see them. Yeah.
Okay, great. So thank you for the introduction. I'm Hanke Heun-Johnson. I'm at the USC Schaefer Center for Health Policy and Economics, as are my coworkers, Darius, Lakdawalla, and Bryan Tysinger. And Julian Reif is at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. And Bryan was actually scheduled to do this presentation, but unfortunately he's out sick, so I'm stepping in for him. I want to thank the RDRC for funding this project and want to provide this disclaimer that the findings that we're showing are ours and not representing the views of any of the agencies. So the project that we're dealing with today is excess mortality and the effects of that during the pandemic on Social Security outlays. I'm not able to forward my slides. There we go. So this is a chart that many of you have probably kept track of during the pandemic, and maybe a little bit too much, but it shows really beautifully the excess mortality in the US from the beginning of the pandemic in March 2020 to current day. And we're seeing excess deaths observed until January of 2023 of this year. And so far we've been going on the average over the seasonal variation. And so hopefully we'll stay that way this year, but we'll see if we're out of the woods just yet. And the question that we had is, who are these people and what does this excess mortality mean for Social Security outlays? because we don't know what the counterfactual situation is of the people who died. We don't know if they were healthy, if they were retired or not, if they had disabilities, even if they would have died a month after their after COVID, after dying from COVID, because we don't observe them otherwise. So that's the question that we had and what the effects are on the Social Security outlays. Now, the standard approach is basically to take a life table by age, gender, and perhaps race, ethnicity, and look at the average lifespan of a person at a specific age. However, we believe that we can do better than that by using a microsimulation, and I'll go into the details on my next slide on the methodology. But we are taking into account chronic conditions as well as nursing home status of simulants, and thereby we can possibly make a better estimate of how long these people would have lived and other characteristics that are important for Social Security benefits as well as contributions. So a quick recap of the highlights of the paper was that although most of the mortality was, of course, during the older ages, for people of older ages, but most of the life years lost, the majority, more than 50%, was for those under 65 years. And of course, it's because these people die younger and they have more life years left. And of course, there was a lot of talk in the beginning of the pandemic that only the sickest of the sick were dying. And we show with our numbers that about 38% of the decedents would have had an average or above average life expectancy, showing that it's not indeed the sickest of the sick, but it's also not average because we're it's not 50% of decedents. So currently the CDC estimates that there are about 1.8 million excess deaths up to January of this year. And we estimate that that results in 24 million life years lost. And that's about 13 years per person. So that's pretty substantial. The microsimulation that we're using is the future adult model and the future elderly model. These are for different age groups. They are first order Markov models and taking in data, survey data from the panel study of income dynamics and the health and retirement study, as well as other survey data to calibrate and validate from these MCBS, NIHS, and MEPS, as well as census data. We take these panel survey data, we estimate transition models to determine what the probability is of people basically changing their status every 2 years in their health characteristics or their personal characteristics, such as do they get diabetes, do they become unemployed, or what are they receiving benefits, do they get children, have children, get married, etc. And we simulate this at the individual level, so we're really able to both look at the risk factors for COVID mortality as well as the outcomes that we're interested in. We're representing 223 million adults in the US over 25 years and older. And those are the people who entered those panel studies, which is the requirement is that you form a household. And the outcomes that we're interested in are included in our simulation. We're predicting mortality, quality of life, health behaviors, disease incidence, functional limitations, disability, survivors benefits, old age benefits, and earnings taxes, nursing home entry, etc. Everything that's going to be important for this project. And we have a lot of collaborators. If you're interested in collaborating, please reach out. We're always interested in new research projects and working together with people around the world. So how do we account for the COVID deaths in the microsimulation? So we begin with the stock population of in the US that is 25 years and older, and we simulate that cohort until death. Then during those pandemic waves, we calculate a risk of COVID mortality as well as regular mortality and assign deaths to specific people, or behind the scenes, we're actually assigned to parts of people based on their weights, and reweight all the outcomes in that way. The excess deaths are coming from the CDC data by race, ethnicity, sex, and age. And we assign these based on risk factors. And then we compare the outcomes of one simulation to the counterfactual COVID-free simulation. The outcomes that we're interested in is related to old age survivor disability insurance spending, related to survivors benefits, retirement benefits, and disability benefits for both the decedents and their family members. And so we have these characteristics for everyone. We know if they're married, when they're getting children, also in the future, and whether they are working, receiving benefits, etc., all their earnings, all their details. And we then determine changes in these outcomes as a total sum for the whole population and compare that to the counterfactual. In general, we're expecting increased spending on survivors' benefits, of course, for children and the decedent spouses. However, in some cases, of course, you'll see a slight decrease because someone who's dying at 30 without children, but then has children at 35 and dies 5 years later, of course, in that case, the counterfactual, there would be survivors' benefits being provided. And then we look at the decedents' benefits as well and their earnings and the taxes that they're not paying in anymore because of COVID. So another part that we're interested is in the racial disparities, and I'm going to have only 2 result slides because we're still processing some of the data. But I wanted to show some of the racial disparities that we have observed. This is also in our first paper that we published. We're showing basically that a larger part of the COVID pandemic burden in terms of life years lost, as well as quality adjusted life years lost, were placed on the Black and Hispanic population. We see about a 1.5 to 2.5 times higher burden in compared to white across basically all ages. And then we were curious, what does this do to the children of these decedents? Because these children will lose a parent, they will be without parents for a specific number of years. And if we quantify that for children in families where a parent has died, we can see that also for this measure, we see a stark disparity where a Black or Hispanic child will have twice as many, 1.5 to 2.5 times as many years without a parent until age 18 compared to white children. And so now I will get into some of the dollar amounts that we are estimating. And this, I want to preface this with saying that we have calculated a lot of the measures in terms of years, but have not been able to finalize the dollar amount. So we're using average amounts for these estimates. I just wanted to provide a general idea of what the how large the different components are. And I'm also not listing all the components that we're working on. But in general, we are seeing approximately 2.2 million years of benefits that are to be paid out to surviving children of decedents, resulting in about $28 billion over their lifetime, up until 18 in most cases. We are estimating about 5.5 million years of missed payroll taxes or self-employment taxes of decedents, amounting to approximately $35 billion. Then on the other side, where benefits that do not have to be paid out because a person has died is about 660,000 years in disability benefits, and this amounts to approximately $12 billion. But the biggest chunk is really in unpaid retirement benefits of decedents. We're estimating approximately $450 billion. And so this is really showing that a lot of older people have died and are do not need to be paid their retirement benefits anymore. And this is it's a little bit cruel, but this will result in considerable savings. And this is similar to, for example, smoking or binge drinking, where that is actually beneficial for these kinds of programs. Now we are, as I mentioned, we are still doing some ongoing analyses. I have not listed all the beneficiary categories that are present, and the rules are complex, as many of you know. And we're working on all these different rules, and family size is taking into that account, that factor, unlike the case where both parents died, etc. Then, as I mentioned, those numbers that I mentioned are average amounts. We want to assign specific benefit amounts based on the characteristics of decedents to get a better idea of their, if they're different than the average. That'll be interesting to find out in itself. And then we have information on the taxes that they paid in our microsimulation, and we'll use that to determine, get a better idea of the missed payroll taxes. And then we will dive deeper into racial ethnic disparities in receiving survivorship benefits. And with that, I will hand it back to you, John. And if anyone has any questions afterwards, feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you, Hanke. That was great. And pretty close to time. Let's go ahead and turn it over to Karen, and I will restart the clock. Now I can hear you.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so this is joint work with my co-author, Richard Johnson. And we also had some advice from our Racial Equity Analytics Lab and Mickey Wade at AARP. No, the normal disclosure, this work was funded by the Social Security Administration through the DRDC, and the results are opinions are those of the authors. So Black people face many systematic advantages that limit their Social Security benefits. Compared with white people, Black people have lower educational attainments. They're less likely to ever marry and have fewer years. They have worse health, higher disability rates, and lower life expectancy, and they work fewer years that give them lower annual earnings. I'm sorry, my screen is acting up badly. Let me just try this again. So our research question is, how much of these systematic racial disadvantages affect their lifetime and annual benefits at age 70. So we show how eliminating many of the systematic disadvantages that Black workers face could narrow the racial gaps, improve retirement incomes, improve, oh my goodness. I'm sorry, I don't understand what's happening.
If one of the technical people wants to jump in, please do. I don't have any answers.
I'm not hitting my cursor to advance, and it's advancing all on its own. Sorry. Okay, so I'm going to fight with my screen. So we show how eliminating the racial disadvantages could narrow the racial benefit gaps, improve the retirement incomes, and improve Social Security finances. Data and methods. So we use Urban Institute's dynamic simulation of income model. The model starts with a nationally representative sample of the US population in 2006. It makes annual projections of demographic and economic outcomes out to 2100. This allows us to do 75-year actuarial projections. The model includes behavioral equations that are estimated using the best available data. These equations include racial differences, either by projecting racial dummies or different equations for Blacks and non-Blacks. We project baseline and alternate simulations. The baseline simulation contain all the racial differences included in the model's behavior equations. The alternate simulations remove Black disadvantages and select the behavioral equations. We then compare the baseline and alternate simulations and calculate the change in annual Social Security benefits at age 70. That's when most people have claimed their benefit. We look at lifetime Social Security benefits and FICA tax, and we look at 75-year finances. In our alternate simulations, we're systematically going to remove Black disadvantages. We do this in health, disability, and death, marriage, education, labor force participation, hourly wages, and all 5 disadvantages combined. We're going to focus on people born between 1996 and 2005. This is when these cohorts they're age 1 to 10 in 2006. And we can measure their benefits at age 70 that happens between 2066 and 2075. The model projects for all these cohorts their benefits through death. And we're going to show the numbers in 2021 inflation adjusted dollars. So what are our results? So this chart shows black and white male and female differentials. I want to focus your attention on the gold bars. These are showing the differences between blacks and whites. The key thing to take away is that the differences in most categories is negative. That is, blacks are worse off than whites. The one exception is for Black female labor force participation, where Black women actually work at Black women's work at higher rates than white women, but the overall number of work years is about the same. But these cumulative disadvantages mean that Black men have about 55% less lifetime earnings and 18% lower lifetime earnings for Black women. So just to acquaint you with my bar charts here, the blue bars show results for white adults. The gold bars show results for Black adults in the baseline, and the black bars show the results of Blacks in the simulation. That includes removing the 5 racial disadvantages. So what is the takeaway? So this is showing median benefits Social Security benefits at age 70. So eliminating our racial differences eliminates racial gaps in median Social Security benefits by about 23%. The male racial gap is much bigger than the female racial gap. Black women's lifetime earnings are more like white women's lifetime earnings, so eliminating the Black disadvantages has a smaller impact on Black women's benefits than on Black men's benefits. But eliminating the disadvantages increases Black women's benefits by about 1%, but 54% for Black men. This is a similar chart, but now looking at median lifetime benefits. Overall, eliminating Black racial disadvantages boosts retiree lifetime benefits by about 23%. The differences are much bigger for Black men than for Black women, 5% increase for Black women and 47% for Black men. So what disadvantage matters most? The most important factor, so the bar charts are showing the change in lifetime benefits, those are in blue, and the change of benefits at age 70, that's gold. The wage differential has the biggest impact on reducing the racial disadvantage. The interesting story about participation is that the benefits at age 70 actually decline in the simulation. That's because as we increase participation, many of those no workers delay claiming. Also, Black workers work at white women work at lower rates than Black women. So when we make Black women work like white women, it reduces employment. But eliminating the health and marriage disadvantages have bigger effects on lifetime benefits than on benefits at age 70. So what is the impact on Social Security finances? So this chart looks at cost and income rates over the 75-year time period, and eliminating the Black disadvantages extends the ability to pay full and scheduled benefits by 3 years. You can see that as the shift out in this black bar, out 3 years from 2035 to 2038. The additional revenue from higher payroll taxes would reduce the required benefit reduction when trust funds are depleted. You can see that by the higher level in the payable benefits in the black bar relative to the baseline, which is the dotted bars. And the trust fund benefits from revenue gains that happen sooner than the higher revenue gains that happen higher than the cost expenditures in the future. So eliminating the racial disadvantages reduces the unfunded liabilities by $1.7 trillion over 75 years. This happens because we get a 3.6% increase in the present value of taxable payroll. It's a 3.9% increase in the present value of non-interest income. This is higher than taxable payroll because the higher benefits also yield higher taxes on benefits. but it's only a 1.6% increase from the present value of cost. So the taxes are rising faster than the cost or more than the cost that saves the trust fund money. So eliminating the Black disadvantages reduces the 75-year actual deficit by 0.27% of taxable payroll. This is actually a relatively small adjustment, but that's partly because Blacks are only 12% of the US population, limiting the impact of the reforms on the trust fund finances. The actuarial deficit remains high, and the changes do not close the long-term financing gap. So summary and conclusions. Well, structural racism reduces Social Security benefits for Black beneficiaries, decreasing mean benefits for relative to white beneficiaries by 26%. Eliminating the systematic disadvantages in health, disability, marriage, education, employment, and wages could increase lifetime benefits of Black beneficiaries by 23%, significantly reducing the racial benefit gap. The wage disadvantage has the biggest impact on lifetime benefits, and gains from eliminating the racial disadvantage are bigger for Black men than they are for Black women. And the present value of payroll taxes is greater than the present value of benefit of additional benefits, improving Social Security finances. So eliminating the systematic disadvantages increases benefits for Black beneficiaries. It improves Social Security finances. It extends the solvency date by 3 years. And most importantly, it reduces the size of the benefit reduction or tax increase needed to maintain solvency, and that improves benefits for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. In your usual efficient way, you have bought us back some time.
Very much, John Sabelhaus, for doing this, and to the panel too. We had a couple of last minute substitutions and they did a great job. I appreciate it.